I'd like to welcome you here today into the galleries for our wonderful program, Artist Insights Virtual Road Trip with Librado Romero. And I want to make sure that I say right off the bat that support for these exhibits we're seeing today and for this program is provided by Art Bridges, our wonderful partner. Also, additional support by Cesar Bujosa and Phyllis Fernandez, Isabella Capigara, and Gordy and Lydia Dinacoche. So thank you very much. I just want to give you a little bit of an introduction to Lee Romero, whose exhibition From the Desert to the River is on the opposite wall. We'll be seeing it in a little while. We're going to be seeing that the landscapes on view are from Lee's journeys from his childhood in Calexico, California, to his studio in Yonkers and a home overlooking the Hudson River. Lee's physical travels around the country and all over the world can be seen as a metaphor for his interior thoughts on the interrelationship of art, photography, and his reminiscences of these locales over time and through his life. His paintings remind us of the power of place in forming our sense of self and anchoring our deepest memories. This theme puts him in conversation with many great painters in our collection, including the work in our concurrent exhibition here, Landscape Art and Virtual Travel, highlights from the collections of HRM and Art Bridges. He was born in Los Angeles, and while he was still young, his parents relocated to Calexico, which is on the US-Mexican border. He studied painting at the San Francisco Academy of Art before enlisting in the US Army, and while he was there, an assignment to be a photographer changed his career path. While he continued to paint and exhibit throughout his life, he also became an intrepid and insightful photojournalist working for the Providence Journal, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the San Francisco Examiner, and El Sol de Mexico, as well as Newsweek, Time, and other magazines. In 2001, he was a contributing photographer to How Race is Lived in America, which earned the New York Times a Pulitzer Prize for national reporting. Having worked for the Times for 5 decades, he retired in 2013 and established himself here in Yonkers, much to our delight. And so I want to introduce you to Lee Romero, who's going to give you great insight to all of the art in these galleries.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here, to say the least. Thank you, Laura. And I worked for all those newspapers because I couldn't keep a job. But the point is, I have a long, long history with this museum. Over 50 years I've been coming here. The reason is, in 1969, when this opened, we were sent up here. A reporter, John Kennedy, was the big art critic in New York Times, and I was assigned photographer. And we came up here in 1970 with the story, and never know where I was doing today. And actually showing the work. And I just want to begin with Cynthia Daignault. I hope I pronounced her name. Because it's just a wonderful, you come into this gallery space and just you're greeted by these incredible, every painting is a gem. And what she did was, my understanding, she crossed the country and every 27 miles she stopped and took pictures, made some sketches, and eventually back in her studio in New York she painted all these wonderful, wonderful images. And it really is such an incredible representation of this country. You start with some brownstones. I don't know if it's Brooklyn or New York, but regardless, these are in order of every 27 miles where she crossed the country. And you get out of the New York area into some farmland, maybe along the Jersey Shore. I'm not sure exactly what route she took. But every single one is just magnificent with all kinds of details. There's a burned out store, which is sadly represents a great deal of economy and so on. You have graffiti, you have a shanty, you have farmland. But the real delight is as you turn the corner here, as you come around the corner, there are 360 representing the circle. The This is what she, and it's just unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. The real joy of coming to something like this is that you can't really take it all in. It's considered one piece, an installation, you may say. But the thing is, I've seen it, I've gone through it, I've studied it for many weeks now. And every time I come and I see something new, there's always something that I finish or something. I naturally gravitated when I first saw this to go and find the Southwest, which is where I'm from. And here you have, which conceivably is Texas or Arizona, Nevada. I can't say for sure, but it's definitely, she captures the feeling, the mood, the weather, the light, everything. It's just exceptional. I can't even believe it. She even, I believe, I have a feeling that might be Chicago, based on that tower. Looks like a tower in Chicago. I could be wrong about that. It could be Boston, the Sears Tower. I don't know, but it doesn't really matter. You really see America with so many. There are paintings over here in the bayou, in the south, and plantations and so on. But the real thing that I love so much about these is they're so beautifully done, so well rendered, such craftsmanship, such passion. The trees, everything. These are not easy things to paint. It takes years to try to master them. I certainly haven't. This is, and that's what I love mostly about these museums. A lot of people come here for different reasons. They come to, at this COVID and such, you come to escape all the terrible things going on around us. And here, you can find some solace and peace and beauty. What happens for me is that I come here mostly to learn. This is my classroom roommates. I come here and I study and I take back and I inspire. And so as we'll move along over here, and you have some photographs taken along the Hudson, which are a good juxtaposition with all the paintings, the Hudson River paintings, which are on another wall. But I want to come straight to here, David Hockney's grand painting of the Grand Canyon. And what's remarkable for me is that it's in almost an echo of Cynthia's installation. These are all done on separate canvases. There's 15 of them. And when you stop and think about the Grand Canyon, it's probably been photographed and painted probably more than any other part of the country. And it's been done in many different styles, classical styles. I'm not sure Adams probably did some photographs there. But so that's a real challenge, and to accomplish something that's so unique to such a popular subject is really remarkable in itself. But what I really love more than anything else is that each panel, each canvas, each space is a painting in itself, in some ways somewhat abstract or more literal here, but still loosely painted, and we have wonderful shades in each one. This little line suggesting the river and a path that goes down to the bottom of the canyon. You might hear take some mules and everything. Anyways, it just all right, Richard Mayhew, I really fell in love with this painting. And I was so delighted to learn that it's not a place, it's from his mind, from his imagination. He paints what he calls moodscapes. And the mood of this is just so relaxing and tranquil. And it's a painting I would love to own a painting. This painting is, in fact. And there's so much, as an artist, for me to learn from it. It's a real lesson in subtlety and just the colors complementing each other in a very soft way. And And when you stop and think about looking through trees and everything, you know, your eye goes and sees all the patterns and such. But if you start looking at the negative spaces, they're all precise and all complementary to one another. And they go on. And the mood of this background could be a hill in the distance. It's so nice where the sky comes down and you know, when it's not carries it. It's just a wonderful, wonderful lesson and inspiring in so many ways. And then the pastel and softness of all these also shapes, which are really kind of reflective of some of these shapes of these rocks, similar. So they complement one another. This piece, I just was looking at it for the first time. It's by someone, Frohawk Two Feathers. It's very whimsical and witty, and it's a fictional map. It suggests up here the Battle of Troy, the Battle of Yonkers. It has all kinds of little, clever little things in it. There's some kind of fish or some kind coming. Anyway, and these two people are saying, give me yours. And I'm not going to try to explain what that means, but I like the idea that it challenges your sense of humor in a lot of ways. Wonderful characters. But it's all made up. It's all made up. This is from the wonderful collection in the Museum of the Hudson River School painters. This is John Douglas. I love the idea. Here she is in a very nice dress of the period, and I love the idea of a painting in a painting. I mean, that just it's so much fun to try to see what she's not painting that. She's looking in this direction because it looks like there's some trees over here. So that in itself is intriguing to me. And I had a guest the other day, a young man who's 9 years old, a friend of the family, and he was just delighted at finding all these figures, the cows, and if you look, there's so many little things about this, the reflection of the sails, just suggestions, little white touches of paint that suggest cottages or homesteads and things like that. And just the whiff of clouds coming across. It's really, now this is what I'm saying about coming here to learn, you know, and to see with what great detail. And if you look at this broken tree, and this one is broken off, it suggests a storm had just come through. So there's a story behind it's really great. And you can find this place, that's the thing. This is a view of the Hudson Highlands. So you can, like, there's another one, very similar in some ways. And I'm always looking for little mysterious little items in here and so on. Bird's nest, someone leaning against a rock, you know, a hiker perhaps, or someone just trying to find some peace of mind, so on and so forth. And again, just little dabs of white. It's a little dab of white, bang, 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 and it fades off, just a reflection. And right here, you know, because when the sun is setting, you see it all the time, you see reflections in the distance. And right here suggests little homes and down in this little crevice of this place now. And, but my real true, these are all, this is wonderful. This is looking at central Yonkers. If you're familiar with Yonkers as it is today, this is absolutely fascinating. You try to figure out where exactly it might be. There's obviously no buildings or churches. They may still be standing, but they're obviously lost in the urban development. And again, they always have some cattle around. So wonderful sky. But here, this one has always been one of my favorites. First of all trees are not, you know, we always say, well, the trees are green. Well, there are many colors, especially in the autumn. And he has such a nice concert of colors, the yellow, the orange, the green, But here's what I love. Here's a stream coming down through here. And if you stand back, you see where the stream continues through the woods, okay? But if you get close, it's just a whisk of paint. It's a brush, a little bit of white paint. It almost looks like it could be a mistake, but it's not a mistake. It's very cleverly, wonderfully crafted suggestion of light through the trees, through the foliage, and just highlights on these leaves. I mean, this takes a lot of time. It's patience that I don't have, that's for sure. But still, so just, you know, the light's coming from here, so the light's hitting it on this side. And then you come into here, and you see that there's a wind, a slight wind blowing, that's blowing smoke. And the wonderful color of the sails juxtaposed the bottom of the Palisades. And look how subtle the light is on the Palisades itself. This would actually, there's a couple here waiting at the train station. This is obviously the train station. This is Hastings on Hudson, just north of here. So, you know, the train goes along the Hudson, it still goes. And just the idea, there's some men loading a wagon down here. It looks like hay bales or something. And maybe a couple walking on the shore here. And then this is always a favorite little detail of mine. In photography, you always try to place the subject against a background where it will be clear that it's dark against light or vice versa, light against. And here, it's just so subtle. There's a dark duck against the light background, and there's a light duck against the mid-tone of brown reflection of the barn. And then there's just like little musical notes of ducks of both white and black. But it just dances across here. But I just really take note of, as a photographer, as a really good lesson, just in that little section right there. And the other thing is, finally, when I paint a lot of trees. I've been painting trees for over 30 years because we live in the woods, near the woods, and I've been going into the woods painting there to learn, to enjoy myself. And then I go to the studio and I paint larger versions and I still, the light hits a tree sometimes, little spots of lights will come down, and I just like that, and I'm playing with that now in my studio at the moment. This is very precise and something I wouldn't have the patience to do. But I love these little fellows with their top hats. They're, you know, it's like the same guy over here. You know. There's a guy in the bottom here looking out the window. Just funny little things. But what I really love is these streamers that suggest the wind, and then the smoke blowing and so on. And then there's tiny little sailboats and things over here. Just little whiffs of paint. But the precision of this, every little detail of it, which I don't know how many people do this. And then there's a painting within the painting again. This is the view of the Hudson. And as it's been said, I'm from a small Mexican border town, Calexico. It's adjacent, it's right, the U.S.-Mexican border separates Calexico from Mexicali. Mexicali is in the tropics. Calexico, when I was growing up, was 4,000 people when we arrived, 1949. It's now about 40,000. And on a recent trip, I was back, and I checked into a motel that didn't exist when we were kids on Imperial Avenue. And I looked out my window, and there were the backyards that we played in. So I painted from the window. I painted this painting, and I know everybody in these houses. Over where these trees are where Victor lives. I hope he's listening now because he's learning Facebook for the first time today. And Merle lived over in here, and Herbie, Harold, and Ernie, and Benita over here. And this tall, elongated, supposed to be a telephone pole, but it's obviously out of proportion. And more like a club. That's where we lived. We didn't live here. And we were a little gang of hoodlums that would meet on Merle's porch every day and plan our adventures. And this is Albert McAllister's backyard. And anyway, there's a million stories about it. This is Mount Signal, which is a beacon in the Imperial Valley. I'm told that they used to build fires at the top so that the pioneers could find their way across the desert at night. I think this is some Bologna and the mother made up. But because it was too hot to travel in the day, it's 120 degrees on the average. And Edna Marie Cole lived clear over here on the coal ranch, Highlands. And anyway, this then is a result of a long, many painting series I did of water towers in Manhattan mostly. And they're an icon to the city. They really represent New York in a special way. I think that almost every artist that I know of has painted water towers at one point or another. But at some time, this one went off on a, I don't know how these figures come about, but they do. They almost appear by magic, but they don't have any real plans when they start a painting. And when they start appearing, then I start enhancing and working with them so that and then it suggests that something is ritual of some kind is going on, and then you throw a nice title on it. But they're not intentional. I'm not trying to tell any kind of. I really paint just for the joy of painting. I mean, it's not so much about the results. It really isn't. This I didn't realize it at the time. Just in the last week I've been thinking about it. This is almost an experiment. Laura and Masha and other people here hate me saying this, but I'm going to work on this again someday. I hope I'd like to sneak into the museum. They said, no, we got the guards watching. But there are a lot of things I'd like to do. This has gone through maybe 5 or 6 changes. Several of those early renditions I should have left alone. But that's the plight of the artist. When you should leave things alone, you don't, and you go on and you got to correct how you screw things up. I still feel there's more to be done here. I want to add some. I'll just tell you. I want to add a phrase across here, and I'll make it in Latin so that people think that I'm a linguist of some kind, which I'm not. The lettering is all. I love textures because I am from the desert with adobe walls, and even in the city you have decay, and it always is fascinating to me. So I create the textures in this by using all kinds of. I used to use marble dust and sand mixed with acrylic. Now I'm throwing in don't faint, but wood putty, and even some. Bathroom grout. People will say, well, it's not going to hold up, it might be stuff. If it starts cracking, it's only going to make it better. It's going to make it seem like it was found in some ancient civilization. I hope. That could be wrong. Again, I'd like to just mention that the figures evolve on their own. I don't have a plan, I don't have a sketch, I don't have any small studies. I just start spreading the paint around, and then you start seeing things like when you look at clouds and you see a bunny rabbit or you see an alligator, whatever you see in the clouds. We all have done that when we were kids. Some of us still do. But at any rate, they just start evolving, and then I kind of enhance by doing the background. And I like the idea that they're not well defined. And one last thing about this is Marino Marini is an Italian artist that I adore. And he did a lot of sculpture and paintings of many things, but one of his motifs was a single rider on a horse with his arms outstretched. So this is kind of in tribute to my love for his work, but it also represents, in retrospect, after it evolved again. This shape evolved on its own. It also represents a story. When it came to the idea that this is from Calexico to the Hudson River, as a thing, it reminded me of Saul Steinberg's classic New Yorker cover, where it starts on 9th Avenue, and you see the West Side Highway, you see 10th Avenue, and then you see the West Side, then you see the Hudson River, then you see, it says New Jersey, then it says all various states, with just rocks represented. And then finally it has Los Angeles and San Francisco, and then it has the Pacific Ocean, and then there's 3 little islands out there that says China, Japan, Russia. It's just whimsical, and I'm planning on trying to add some notations here, that this is Calexico, this is New Mexico, and so on, so up to the Hudson River. But that may or may not happen. So I'm going to just take a moment to tell a story, because this, again, most of this comes from the subconscious, and it's afterwards that people use their own imagination. And I do the same. I look at them and I say, what does that remind me of? I would always love to invite children to look at them and to write a short story about what they think they're seeing. It'd be an interesting challenge for them. But this came to be where my father told me a story when he was young, growing up in New Mexico. His parents and his grandparents, they were cowboys and raised horses. And he told me the story where his grandfather called him over in a field, and he said, Librado, there's a horse, that little foal that was born is ready to ride. I want you to have it. That's your horse. That's your pony. And he ran over, and they saddled it up. He ran to tell his mother about the horse. She said, did you thank your grandfather? So he rode out there, and all these cowboys were around my father's grandfather, and he had died. He was having a heart attack when he told my father to saddle up that pony. And so years passed, and I was visiting the old, it's in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico, and it's still there. There's nothing there. Adobe ruins and old church that's no longer functioning. And several people that live there. One of them is my cousin, and actually my father's cousin, who was showing us around, and he pointed out to the field. He said, you see that rock? He says, that's where your great-grandfather died. And I could see my father's story come to life. I mean, I could see how far he had to travel to get to the corral, and then to the house to tell his mother. And so it all came together. It was another remarkable thing. And so that's what this represents to me. But it wasn't intentional. That's the point. None of it is. Then I'm just going to move quickly now, but this is a variation on that idea. I had a teacher in art school, and he was really big on variations. If you have a subject, try it in many different ways. And that's what I think Monet did with the haystacks, Van Gogh with fields, and everybody participates in that idea. So this is basically a variation, and again, added word. And now I have to mention that all the words and lettering have come to represent all the texting and the technology that we're surrounded by, where people are texting messages. So we're surrounded by invisible letters and words and sentences. One's going off to the satellite and back. So that's pretty much what I'm trying to suggest in all of these things that we're constantly surrounded by. And this happens to be a song that I wrote about going back to Calexico. And there's a whole bunch of my friends' names in here and so on. Victor and Merle, Harold and Hurley, and Lalo and Chaco and Memo and Kiko. Anyway, now just quickly, this is one of the many watercolors that I do. It started during COVID, where I wasn't necessarily comfortable going to the studio every day, but I am now. But the point is, I'd be on my balcony, and there's small pieces, and I have probably hundreds of them. This is, from my window, there's marvelous shapes of buildings on the hill in Yonkers, and I'm always playing with the abstraction of them. And while you don't see these trees from my window in the studio, I can do what I want. This is America, so I threw some trees in here and it's artistic licenses. So I just like playing. It also gives it depth. I think if I just painted it with just the shapes, it might be fine. I just like playing one thing off the other. The same thing does. And these all come from working in Riverdale Park. Like I said, I would go in the park with my easel and I would paint. Did lots of paint. I love painting on location. And then I go to the studio and again just do variations of those experiences. And this is more representative of Milford, Pennsylvania, and the Delaware River Gap, where I go off and have friends. Phyllis and Sessa out there have wonderful property and I've painted on their property many times. But again, it's just the idea of shapes, giving some depth to other shapes. And of all the many paintings I've attempted looking at the Palisades, this block of color represents the Palisades. This little strip of white represents the light, and I've seen it so many times driving home towards the evening, where the light just brilliantly shines off the river. So and it's just white light. So that's just a sliver of the river from a distance, and some fields, and then again the trees and they're so much fun to work with. That's the whole point of painting for me is not so much the result, but it's the experience. And if you're not having fun, then what's the point? And then again, same idea. Here's the Palisades. And again, the shapes appear on their own. I don't attempt to formulate them. They basically just appear. I mean, I could look up in here and find shapes or figures if I wanted to, but I'm satisfied with this. Like right here, I could make that into some kind of an angel flying if I wanted to. But I'm satisfied with this the way it is now. And I just like the idea of doing it. If you ask children or anybody really, what do you think is going on? And why are these figures so much larger? Well, it could be a giant sculpture. It's not for me to say what it is. I don't even have any of it. This doesn't really exist. It's really like Mr. Mayhew's paintings over there. They're all fabric just from my imagination. And that's where I live, in my imagination. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. And everybody have a wonderful day.